a life annuity or guaranteed annuity is your kind of traditional annuity that people would have got from their companies or pensions before, before everything turned into defined contributions. That is, you're going to receive X amount of money every month for the rest of your life. It's a guaranteed product. You may have an inflation aspect to it that covers with inflation, which of course is highly recommended. So it will increase by inflation every year. And it's guaranteed, all the rest of it. The problem with it is that it dies with you. So when you die, it's an insurance product. There isn't a pool, and a lot of people get confused. They think there's a lump sum there. There is no lump sum. You've bought an insurance product, and that insurance product makes you a promise. And then you've got the living annuity. And the living annuity is very market related. So you take the money and you're able to invest it. And then this gets more complicated. And this is the drawdown Liesl was talking about. You've got to decide how much income you're going to draw down from that every month. And this gets a little bit tricky if you are drawing down too much money, because you will run out of money over your lifetime. And of course, the other problem with the living annuity is that if the markets don't return what you thought they would, there's also consequences there. Yet what we found until recently, and I say until recently, things have changed, is that people tended to prefer the living annuity. And the reason was, I think, twofold. One is that people feel there's an inheritance. They want to leave some money to their families, to their children. And you can't do that with a life annuity, okay? It dies with you. Whereas here they could leave something for their kids. And somehow we all seem to think that when we get old, we're going to have enough money to give our kids, and without realizing that most likely our kids are going to be looking after us. But anyway, that's one side. And the other one has been that until 4 years ago, market returns were pretty good. So you could get, get a better income in many cases from your living annuity than you could perhaps from your life annuity, who a couple of years ago, the interest rates or annuity rates you were getting were not as good. So I think we saw this massive shift away from life annuities to living annuities. And my sense, and maybe Tracy, you can comment on this just now, is that there's a big reversal. Big market, 4 years of negative market growth, or nearly negative market growth this year, and people are like, I want guarantees. I can't do this volatility stuff. And then in between all of these is also this idea of a hybrid. We got a lot of questions about that as well, which we'll answer. And that is where you put together, either you actually put together something where you buy a life annuity for a portion that kind of covers your basic income needs, and then you have a living annuity for top up, or something like My Retirement Solution, which uses living annuities but smooths the income and allows you to draw down on, you have decisions about how to trade off between inheritance and spending now. So I just thought I've got a quick little slide just to show, so people can maybe just see the relative pros and cons of that. So your life annuity, as I said, your income's guaranteed for life. Your living annuity, it's not. The living annuity plus, that is specifically around the product, My Retirement Solution product, where it uses some of the elements to try and provide some guarantees. But a life annuity, flexible, is not flexible to choose your income. Once you've chosen it and once you know what you're getting, that's it for life. Obviously, a living annuity, you can increase and decrease within the range that Liesl mentioned of 2.5% to 17.5% of your capital. A life annuity does not allow you to leave money for your children on your death. A living annuity does. And once you buy a life annuity, you can never change out of it. As I said, you've bought an insurance product. Whereas a living annuity, and this is one of the questions we also got, which we'll deal with, you could actually at some point convert that into a life annuity if you wanted. So that's just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about now, moving into the segment around those two. And I wanted to start off really, Liesl, I'm going to put this question to you. And just to make a point that, your annuities are generally paid monthly. You could, I suppose, ask them to be paid quarterly or annually, but generally speaking, you could structure it however you choose to. But Liesl, I wanted to talk to you about this issue of drawdown, because you spoke about a 5% drawdown, and we've had a question from someone here saying, I've got this living annuity. I've been drawing down 7.5% a year for the last 4 years, and my portfolio, I'm losing money. I'm not going to make it. And I want to talk about this because this drawdown, I think, has been the biggest issue with living annuities.
Thanks, Maya. Yes, it's important. Even though legislation allows you to draw down between 2.5% and 17.5%, this is essential if you want your retirement income to be sustainable for life and also beat inflation. And that is that you've got to draw a reasonable income. Now, to some extent, your drawdown rate is influenced by what your underlying investments or asset allocation is. But as a rule of thumb, we know that there's a sort of a sweet spot if you want to it to last between 4% and 5%. If you need to draw anything more than that, then you probably should consider not being in a living annuity. Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, because that's what your My Retirement Solution would show you quite quickly.
Yes.
That drawdown. Tracy, any comment from you?
Yeah, so I think, and this is obviously a simplistic way to look at it, but it always helps me when I think about it like this. So you start off with your return. Hopefully it's positive. We know it's not always positive, but you start with that. Then you deduct inflation. So let's say, this guy, I mean, at the moment, basically returns are 0. So you start with 0. Then you deduct inflation, about 3.5%, Then you deduct your 7.5%. Now you're on -11. And if you're paying 2% in fees, you're on -13%. In 1 year, you've basically, in purchasing power, wiped out 13% of your fund, which I think is an important comment Liesl touched on long term. Where are you invested? You have to be, there are dips, but you have to be in sufficient growth assets that long term you can counter that. You have to consider your fees and you have to consider your drawdown, so those are the sort of 3 most important things to look at.
And Tracy, in terms of, so that was the living annuity, and that's market related. You get to choose your drawdowns. On the life annuity side, we've had quite a lot of questions. People have started to notice that life annuities, those guaranteed annuities, are actually giving you a pretty good income at the moment. Why, and how is that sort of, why are we seeing those, given that interest rates are so low, why are life annuity rates so high?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting dynamic we have in our market at the moment, because as we know, short-term rates are about 3.5%, which is extremely low. But actually the longer term rates, which is what's relevant, because remember, a life annuity is going to pay an income for 20, 30 years. So the rates that are relevant to that are your long-term interest rates, which aren't really spoken about much in the normal markets. But those are basically at levels that they were last at 18 years ago. So those are actually a lot higher than the short-term interest rates. And, that's a few things, it's expected future inflation, what's happening to the South African economy and risk. So there's a few reasons for that. But definitely, life annuity rates are really good, in the sense that the higher the interest rate, the better the income is you can get from a life annuity. And that, combined with the fear of people in response to the market events, we've actually seen quite a shift pre-COVID and post-COVID in our testing, what people prefer, as you said in your introduction.
Yeah, so I think that is all, people tend to follow whatever's doing well at the time. so we definitely seeing that reaction. And again, this is I can't tell you how many questions we got around, how do I choose between the two? How do I choose a life annuity or living annuity? And I'll give you an example. This person obviously seems to be leaving a pension fund. It must be a defined benefit, because they're offering a guaranteed, or not, but their pension, their default pension is offering a guaranteed life annuity with annual inflation-linked increases and a 75% surviving spouse pension. So in other words, if the main member passes away, the spouse will continue to get 75% of the income. My financial advisor suggests I rather buy a living annuity. How do I choose between the two? Who wants to handle that one?
Okay, I'll take it. Do you want to go, Liesl?
No, it's fine. You go, I'll chip in.
Okay. So I think it's important for them to look at what their needs are. If they need to leave an inheritance for some reason, or it's a really important motive, then a living annuity could be appropriate for them. Or if they need that flexibility around their income, maybe, I don't know, for whatever reasons, and they don't have other savings or emergency buckets, that is a potential reason. But I think they've really got to probe the advisor and ask, why are you recommending a living annuity for me? What is the reasoning behind it and the thought, and really understand that in light of their actual circumstances. I did post in the chat a link. Actually, we use a coffee analogy to explain the different annuities that we find really resonated with people and helps them understand. And maybe for this person, it's useful for them to watch it. It's quite short, maybe to get a bit more background when they go and speak to their advisor again.
And also to do that comparison, you know, we've heard Liesl saying a drawdown maximum 5% from your living annuity. So compare that to what the income is from the life annuity, and obviously weigh those options up as well. Liesl, what comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, health is also an important consideration, because if you are on poor health, there may be a good reason why you would want to have a living annuity, because the inheritance need suddenly becomes more important, versus if you had a life annuity, then you would lose everything on the day that you die.
Yeah, it's actually it's a bit morbid, but it's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
And Liesl, you know, one of the other questions we got is, what is the best plan if your pension is under R1 million? And I think this is also very important, is that at what point does a living annuity make sense versus a life annuity? Because there is almost a touch point where you have to have a fair amount of capital for a living annuity to make sense. I mean, if you're less than R1 million, does it make sense? Which one would you pick?
Maya, really, if you're less than R1 million, it doesn't make sense to consider a living annuity. And purely, we were discussing it a lot when we developed the tool. We just didn't believe that you could withstand market volatility. And it's probably better for you then to opt for a guaranteed product, and probably even a little bit higher than R1 million.
And we're getting a lot of questions around the hybrid idea of you know, do you blend the living annuity with the life annuity? Or one person sort of said, what if I take 4 different living annuities so that you can convert each one to a life annuity as you get older? How would you look at combining those? Is there about you take the living annuity and then at a certain age you convert into a life annuity? How would you recommend handling those?
Okay, so there's a few. Let's start with some of them. So in terms of, should you start with a living annuity and then at some point, you know, is it worth going to life annuity? And if you look at all the research, even though the rate quoted at that point is higher, because as you get older, you can get quoted a higher rate in a life annuity, what you can actually buy at that time shows that it's not optimal to delay converting. So if you plan to take out a life annuity, the best time to do it, unless there's some, you know, really abnormal interest rates or something like that, the best time to do it is now. It's because in a life annuity, as you said, this is an insurance product. So those who die young, and again, it sounds morbid to say, basically sponsor those who live a long time. Now, in your living annuity, you don't have that sponsorship. So your money doesn't grow as much, and now you've got this lower sum of money you're trying to convert into a life annuity. So I know a lot of people treat it like that, but generally the best time, if you are going to look at a life annuity, to do it is sooner rather than later. And I think Liesl had some comments she wants to make on the splitting in multiple annuities.
No, just to say that it's actually possible. For a long time, there was no clarity on whether you could actually buy multiple annuities. And then now at the moment, as it stands, it doesn't prohibit it and it doesn't allow it. In practice, we know that it happens. So it's worth checking with your it's worth checking when you want to buy it. There also used to be something that in one of the GE notices that actually required a guaranteed minimum amount of 150,000. That's also fallen away. So you just need to check, if you are considering doing that what the entry level is of the provider that you're looking at.